cutting on the audio. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody here in the building, also those watching online for our Bible study this morning. Before we get started, I want to ask Brother Greg Odom, if you will, lead us in our opening prayer. One little announcement I want to make before we begin. Next Sunday morning, we have a gentleman preaching for us, Brother Lee Haggard. I think that's how you pronounce it. If not, he can correct it next week. Anyhow, he has requested he also do the Bible class. So he will be doing the Bible class this morning. Said he has some kind of special little program or something that he'd like to do for us. So we have let him do that. So we won't have this class. We'll have the class, but he will be doing it with his own material. So just a little announcement for that. This morning, we are on page 29. There's one little section here that is actually, I should have done last week and I didn't do it before we get to the questions on this section. And the next little section there is the example of Joseph. Who is Joseph here? What, is that who this Joseph is? No, not this Joseph. Who is this Joseph? Okay. And what do we know about Barnabas? Encourager. In fact, that's what the name actually means, isn't it? Son of an encourager. So, I mean, and Barnabas is what? Is he prominent in the New Testament from this point on? Very much so, isn't he? So, that's a little section here that just kind of introduces him to the Bible story here. Introduces Barnabas here. So, just remember that this is kind of where he comes in. And who changed his name from Joseph? The apostles changed his name because it's obvious what kind of man, just from this little bit of thing, was Barnabas or Joseph here. Gave it all to him, and obviously he was what? If they changed his name to Barnabas, which is what? Son of an encourager. What does that mean? Reading about his character, he was always what? Encouraging folks, probably what, upbeat most of the time, that type of. So just a little example of a person here that we see that we're going to talk more and more about as we get on into the Acts and on as we study other portions of the New Testament. Okay. So in 2 weeks we'll get started down here on this section, Ananias and Sapphira. But right now we need to go to the questions. I say that we might get to part of it before the day's over. I don't know. Okay. These questions are on pages 24 through 29. How did Peter and John answer the lame man who asked for alms? Okay. What else did they tell him? Or should they tell him? That's right. Silver and gold we don't have, but we'll give you what we do have. Okay. What was the reaction of the people who saw him leaping and walking? Wondered, amazement. If you knew someone that had been lame since birth, saw him sitting there probably day after day after day, and then all of a sudden saw him walking, what would you think? believe you would. I mean, what, you know, was he faking all these years? Unfortunately, that's probably what most of us would think now, isn't it? And that's because of what we've been conditioned to. So, but yeah, I can't believe this. This man been sitting here, been like this, you know. And we talked a little bit about the miracle itself of just being able to walk, but to me, knowing a little bit about medical stuff, like this, he, and he's probably in his 40s. I don't know for sure, but if he didn't like that since birth, that means what his legs were probably what the muscles were just, you'd say, jelly probably. So that was part of the miracle too, wasn't it? They were strong. And he wasn't just up walking, was he? He was leaping around. So, a large crowd out of curiosity ran into Solomon's porch, which is part of the temple there that they were going into. And from what I can gather, how large was this temple? I think we talked about it one time. You know, it wasn't just some little 20 by 20 building, was it? It was. I think it may have been several acres. I'm not sure. The temple itself, the property. Now I think I was somewhere where it was something. I think Linda looked it up one time too. How large the temple was. You're like me. Remember one thing from one time to the other. But it was not just a small thing. So this, in fact, it had several gates, I think, too. So, and they were in the here toward where Solomon's porch was here. I'm not sure. Dale probably would know. It may be a bunch. It may be several different buildings. You know, but whatever it wasn't just one little small little area. It was a larger area. Okay. Okay. This list three basic gospel facts Peter mentioned in Acts 3:13 through 15. I read over and over, the verses and over what Brother Walden put in his book. And I think you could have put several different things down for there. I really do. As I read that, I kept listing things down. So there could have been several different, I think, three things on that one. But you know, a basic fact. So, yeah, sometimes these questions, you kind of almost have to be in the mind that made the question and know exactly what they wanted. But to me, there was, I don't know, there was three basic, but there were several different facts that was listed in those verses there. So, so that one is, like I said, sometimes you have to know exactly what the man that wrote the question. Yes, it is. Okay, what explanation for the miracle did Peter give? You know, don't look at us. We're not the ones that did this. Jesus is the one that, in His name is what we've done. Yes. Okay, what prophecy of Moses did Peter mention? So, I know these glasses are getting terrible. Skip all these things. Peter admitted, okay, Peter admitted that it was through ignorance that men had crucified Jesus. What shows that ignorance did not excuse him? But I put down what Ann said that Peter told them to do what? Repent of what they had done. And if ignorance had excused them, would they have had to done that? So uh, if they, you know, that was they were told to repent, and that shows that just because they didn't know, uh, what is a saying we hear today when we talk about the law, even just the civil law? What ignorance is no excuse. And I think here the same thing. He told them what? I know y'all are what? Ignorant of what this was all about, but that's no excuse for what you did. But so on that final day is when someone goes up and says, well, I didn't know. And that's why it's up to us to, you know, now that's not saying that everyone we talk to is going to want. Listen, but we need to tell as many people not, and I'm not saying that we need to talk to everybody in the world because I mean, we can't do that. But today, we kind of have an opportunity to do it more so than what are we doing here this morning with this thing, with this video, say this thing. And that's what a shepherd does, isn't it? Takes care of the flock. In fact, probably today, we probably have a greater opportunity to do that than our ancestors did. Our ancestors were what? Confined to what? More than likely, I mean, within what? 25, 30 miles of where they lived at the most. And now today we do what? We travel what? I mean, just in a normal day traveling, just to go to town to get groceries from down here is what? 15, 20 miles. I mean, so I'm just saying that we have an opportunity, I think, today, a little bit more so than others. We have other media that we can, expand on. So we have a little bit more of opportunity for that than even our ancestors did. Definitely. And I understand that some people are not as adept at talking to people as other people are. But as Dennis said there, just the way we live can be an teaching tool, too. So, okay. Number 7. What prophecy? Finally, get to number 7. What prophecy of Moses did Peter mention here? Yeah. So, and of course, who was Moses talking about here? Even though Moses may not have actually known why. I don't think he knew specifically when he was talking about that it would be Christ. But I think he knew that God had told him why. I'm going to raise somebody up in latter days that's going to why. He may have, I don't know, but it's kind of hard to. Moses probably envisioned everything, about this. But he could have, God could have told him everything. But it's going to raise someone up that's going to take care of this. Is going to be this part of the plan here. So, okay. Which Jewish sect seized Peter and John and kept them in jail overnight? The Sadducees. And normally I'd probably ask the next question. not even thinking about it being the next question. What particular point was disturbing to them? That they were teaching what? The Sadducees were teaching there's not a resurrection. What was Peter and John teaching? There was. And in fact, they were talking about what resurrection? The one of Christ being raised from the dead. So, what question did the council ask the apostles the next day? Okay, but what? It's what? By what power? In whose name are you doing this? Preaching. Just the next question. What did Peter tell them? They're not doing this in their name, are they? They're doing it in Jesus' name, God's name. So, yeah, like as you said, now you can just imagine them saying, now we've got 12 more of these people out here doing this. So, and as you said, and as I think we maybe in some of the questions, but some of the others, what did they actually say? It says, we cannot punish them for what? For doing this miracle, can we? We can't punish them for that because what? It's known over what? All of Jerusalem. People have seen it, they know it. So how can we punish them for doing this? And how did, what else did the council think about what Peter and John had told them here? How did Peter and John stand up to it? They did, didn't they? They stood up to them, they spoke boldly, and didn't back down on anything that they said, or back down on anything they had done or said. So, and the next question, when the council released them, what did they tell Peter and John? They want to go quietly, let's don't talk about this anymore. Not to speak in his name anymore. Let's just kind of, we'll let you go, but this is what we want you to do. So, how did they respond to this? Okay. Basically, they told them, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that like this. It's impossible for us to go out and not speak in his name, not tell the people about this man, about what he's done to us. And just, we're going to go out and we're going to go in and speak. We may have already mentioned this one, but why did the Jewish leaders marvel concerning the miracle that apostles performed? Uneducated, untrained men. As we mentioned a while ago, what about this miracle was it just a few people knew about it? The whole city knew about it. So they couldn't do what? They couldn't say, well, this may have happened, this may not happen. So they uneducated, they had no idea. Okay. I mean, we probably would consider ourselves most of us educated, probably more so than, I know more so than these men were, but yet they stood up. And of course, now we have to understand too, and I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but God was helping them here. I mean, He had given them the knowledge and everything here. Well, He's helped us, yeah. You're right. I mean, we have the Bible, we have the knowledge. They, no, go ahead. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's usually, if we have a problem, we can usually find an answer to it in the Bible somewhere. And we may not know where it's at, but somebody's going to. And that just kind of, as we see a little bit later here, Peter and John wasn't alone here, were they? They had other disciples, other men there that they could, after, in fact, um, yeah, it's kind of getting into this, but they were places that they could go. In fact, they did go, you know. So it's there somewhere. And usually we have help. We can have get help finding it too. What did the disciples pray for when Peter and John reported what the council had commanded them? Courage. And I mean, that's what we can today when we're running against the problem. As Van mentioned a while ago, we have everything we need. We just need the why. Use it, the courage to use it. And I know sometimes that's not an easy thing to do either, to try to use it to talk to someone, especially in today's society. I tell you. How was love and generosity demonstrated among the early disciples in Jerusalem? They shared everything they had. And just we're going to talk some more, but the next question goes into it. What probable reason was there for such an action? these people were probably not from just what the surrounding Jerusalem, but they were probably from what all over the known world at the time. So they would have come to Jerusalem with probably just enough money or what it to stay for what the week of the Passover, you know. So when they stayed longer than that, what happened? They ran out of money. They ran out of food. They were just no telling where they were staying, you know, sleeping or whatever. So the Christians that lived there in Jerusalem done what? Just banded together and sold a lot of their possessions and got the money and took care of them, didn't they? Can you imagine the same thing? You know, and this is not a real good example, but at the same time, a calamity occurs here. What usually happens? And I'm just not talking Christians, but just general speaking. What happened? And even if we find out there's some Christians been affected somewhere, what have we done in the past? You know, guilt. So I mean, and be honest, that usually happens. Usually the agencies end up with more than they can use sometimes. So, and that's a good thing. Not just being Christians, but I mean, you know, just people in general. But Christians, we are to. But in that, as Christians, who are we to take care of first? Brothers and of the church, you know, and other Christians in the church now. And then if we want to individually help other people, it's, you know, you're not commanded not to. Just we're to help Christians and people like that first if they are in trouble. Okay, we mentioned this at the beginning of the lesson. Who is mentioned by name as one who engaged in this generosity? Joseph, who later become known as who? Barnabas. He was called who? Barnabas by the apostles, which means, okay, son of encouragement. And that kind of, as I mentioned when we talked about it a few minutes ago, what really does that tell you about his character? Having your name changed to a name that means son of encouragement, exhortation, or, you know. And I think we can see that in Barnabas later on, different times, you know. So, no, you don't. Okay. Any questions or anything about that section? We're kind of going through this. I mean, we seem like we're already up to chapter 7, but you know, or chapter 5 here actually. This whole section was 3 through 7, I think. But you know, we're kind of going to get into a little section here that I sometimes you talk about it and you say, how can people do this? But people are people. You know, who are we fixing to talk about here? Ananias and Sapphira. How many times have we talked about Ananias and Sapphira over your in Bible studies, from downstairs to little kids' classes and over the years? But it is still, you still come back to it, and it is what? It still is a lesson that needs to be taught. This is not, you know, we say, well, it's just Ananias and Sapphira. We know what happened. But you need to know what happened, and you need to remember what happened. So, where are we at in Jerusalem? What's going on? This is kind of like a little review. What's going on in Jerusalem at the present time? Christians here, they come to town, they've been baptized, and they've decided to what? Which is a good thing. They've decided to what? Stay and listen to the apostles and learn as much as they can. So, but at the same time, they've run out of money, run out of food. So the Christians here in Jerusalem are selling their possessions and getting money and taking care of these people. So Ananias and Sapphira did what? They've got a piece of property. And okay, they well was actually keeping half of it the problem. They lied about it. If they'd wanted to sell it and keep half of it and give half of it to it, would that have been anything wrong with that? No, not in the least would it. But what did they do? As he mentioned, they lied about it, didn't they? They tried to, and basically a lie is why they're trying to make you believe that, make the people believe what? That they've done something they didn't do. Trying to build themselves up in people's eyes, aren't they? And as said, I mean, as you said, if they had said, look, we really need half of this to help us too. No, I don't. Part, okay. No, we don't know. No, I don't know. That I misspoke on that one. I just, for some reason, I always just thought hat, but yeah, it does, doesn't it? Uh, But it doesn't matter how much they gave or how much they kept, does it? Not as far as anything that they would have done. Uh, Even giving part of it. I mean, they said, look, we just need part of this. We've got to have it to survive too. So, that'd been fine. But no, who comes in first with it? Ananias, the husband does. And he comes in, and it's kind of, you think about it, he comes in, he gives the money that they're to the apostles and says, look, we sold this property, and this is the proceeds from the, I don't know how he said it, but he said, this is the proceeds from the sale of it, implying what? It's all here. And what does Peter tell him? Apply to the Holy Spirit. And what happens to him at this point in time? Can you imagine people, if you've been standing around there and saw this man comes in, gives the money, and then he talks to Peter, and Peter tells him this, and the man just what? Falls dead at Peter's feet there. The same, but they're one. Two different people. Or two different entities, I mean. They didn't they didn't quite tell you the everything. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know, but then we got just a few minutes left. But to me, the young men come in and do one, take him out and bury him someplace. That's to me. That's and then 3 hours later, I think it says who comes in. Probably doing what? Looking for her husband. So what does she comes in? Anna, I mean, Sapphira comes in, and she does what? Same thing. What happens to her? Same thing. And I've always wondered, well, did in 3 hours' time, couldn't someone have went and told her, you know, I know this is a lesson and all, but I mean, you always wonder about things like this. Some of the stories you read sometimes here in the Bible, some of the way things happen sometimes. But you're thinking 3 hours time, somebody surely could went and told it. Yeah, it's possible, I guess. It could have. We really don't know, and we're not told specifically all the details. But I mean, it just you know says that it was all of it. It was a whole. Okay. That was the consequences of a little white lie. What we some people would call a little white lie. To me, there's no such thing. It's a lie. A lie is a lie is a lie. So I again appreciate y'all's attention and all your comments and all. And like I said, next week we'll have a special speaker during this time, but then we'll get started back. We'll kind of get started back. It'll be 2 weeks of, but we'll get started back with the Ananias and Fire and talk more about that story and get on into the rest of it. Appreciate your attention.